My name is Marat. I didn't get GDPR approvals for this talk, so I'm going to say where I work at. But I'm famous for being on TV show once in Japan called Hokotate. And that was the last step into the heart of the TV show. They had to shut down the show after that period. But yeah, it was fun. Had more weight, had better eyes. Today I'm going to talk about a tool, an open source tool that we released at Black Hat last year. I mean, it's a quite advanced tool for testing your application firewalls. And it's called GoTestWAF. It's called GoTestWAF. So the tool is written in Go language, as you might have guessed, and it's used to evaluate security solutions. So let's say you are a security engineer in a company and you want to implement certain web application firewall or API security solution, such as WallArm or Perva or Cloudflare WAF or AWS WAF, whatnot, right? So then you would really want to test whether the solution is actually, worth the money you're paying for. And this open source tool is designed specifically for these evaluations. And what it does, it has a massive, like 2,000 entries list of payloads that web application firewalls should normally block. And also it has false positive payloads. It's funny, we took them from the book, from real books, from Guggenheim library, I think, but they look like SQL injection or like cross-site scripting, but it's actually a real text from the real book, so it's not just made up string. Well, we built support for all these kind of edge cases that none of other tools support, like for example, gRPC protocol is the only, you can only test it using GoTestWAF. There's no other tool, as far as I know. And there are also encodings like base64, gzip, XML. It actually understands Swagger files, so it can embed payloads into like in appropriate locations. And then it builds like a fancy report in a proper evaluation way, saying how many true negative tests were blocked and how many true positive tests passed, right? So it doesn't only test, I mean, the perfect WAF would just block everything, right? Then it would always have 100%. But you want to test whether it actually passes real traffic and blocks malicious traffic as efficiently. So that's why we added like false positive support to this tool. It's open source on GitHub, so you can just go github.com/WallArm GoTestWAF, or there is a Docker container on Docker Hub. You can just run it. Please star. It has almost 1,000 stars already. I actually didn't update the picture, way more than now. The way you can extend the tool, you can contribute to the tool by submitting pull requests for YAML files. So all payloads are described in a YAML format, very easy to understand. I'm going to show you how it works. So the new feature that we released just for last Black Hat USA 22 it was presented, same presentation was in Black Hat USA Arsenal, is the Swagger file support. So you can just feed Swagger file to the tool, and I'm going to demo you later, and then you will see very easily that the very complex API can get like full scan coverage. If you think of similar tools, like if you were to like evaluate WAF solutions yourself, well, there are like a whole bunch of them, and most popular is like Zap Proxy, but Zap Proxy actually doesn't do false positives, and also doesn't support like a complex API protocols like. Well, it kind of does GraphQL, but it is a bit of pain to configure. And gRPC, it doesn't support it at all, so only GoTestWAF supports it. But yeah, if you want to, for example, evaluate your web application firewall solution using some other tool. These are the tools, including the AB is a Apache load generation tool, or you can just use curl and like run payloads manually. But GoTestWAF has like 2,000 something payloads, and the way it works, let me go through the tools, right? So the app has GUI, but doesn't support gRPC. There is like Wrestler and Dread. Those are good fuzzers, but for specifically API. And AB, JMeter, Yandex Tank are load generating tools, so we can just like, for example, do DDoS simulation kind of thing. And GoTestWAF is just a CLI tool written in Go. So internally, what you have is just a whole bunch of YAML files that have 3 places to extend. One is where to put the payload. Second is how to encode this payload. And third one is the payload itself, right? So the beauty of this, why it is important not just to have a library of payloads, but also encode them, because normal APIs rarely operate on just plain text, right? So they usually, for example, that was just explained, right? So you have test cases in a YAML file. You have payload, how to encode the payload, and where to put it. The reason why this is how it looks like. This string, if you just put like a mod security, like a regular expression-based, set of rules for WAF, then a lot of web application firewalls will actually detect all of those, right? It's kind of trivial. You will see like something like printf or etc password or some command, and it hits almost immediately. But once you actually apply some encoding, which normally APIs do, right? So you rarely have this in a parameter as is. You have some kind of URL encoding or like base64 applied to it inside of some HTML form, or it could be in JSON, and JSON could be like base64 encoded, and inside of JSON it could be like JSON payload, but inside of JSON payload you can have a field called like body, and then it goes like XML document inside of JSON, right? So that's a very frequent condition, and a lot of web application firewalls actually give up if there are like more than 2 encodings applied to the payload. So the way GoTestWAF works, it takes the payload, applies the encoder, and applies to the placeholder. So total number of payload requests will be number of these payloads times encoders times placeholder. So in this case, 3 payloads, 1 encoder, and 4 places to inject it. So it total 12 requests. Doing it manually in the app or like burp suite is also possible, but you will have to code a lot yourself. So the current community contributions include, of course, all of us top 10 of OWASP API top 10, and some kind of known web application firewall bypasses, like strings that actually are exploit, but are not detectable by any web application firewalls. Also, we have so community contributions. The guys from vulners.com contributed a lot. The guys like basically maintain the threat intel feed of all exploits that exist in the world. So whenever they see a new payload used for an attack, they usually send a pull request to us. So have a lot of community contributions. Also false positive texts from books, OWASP of course, and OWASP API based. So based on the folder, you can just go to GitHub and check. This is the false positives I mentioned earlier. So this is from the text, right? Union was a great select. We'll hit some regular expression that goes for like union select, or like this kind of emails, or like SQL-looking comments, because in books sometimes they use like double dash to do long dash. Like time, for example, looks like a command. Echo in the mirror looks like a command. So all of those should not be blocked by WAF, but a lot of WAFs actually do block them. And that's the new feature that we just added last year. It is, you can normally WAFs usually look just only at the requests, and then the tool actually works without any Swagger files. It will just produce requests. But the problem with that is that your app wouldn't respond properly to it, right? So your app would answer something like 400 bad requests. Normally WAF will respond with 403, means it blocked the request. But if the request is not valid, then your app will always say like 400 or like, I don't know, some 500 error because you're sending invalid JSON. But now GoTestWAF supports Swagger files. So what you can do is specify this parameter, OpenAPI file, give it a Swagger file, OpenAPI v3, and run it from Docker, and it will just scan the endpoints as they were, like they would look like legitimate traffic. And then it produces two types of reports. One is CSV, another is PDF. So you can like digest them and do analytics on them, or just look at them beautifully. The way to read this report, well, first it gives you like a really simple score, like F or A, but also it compares application security payloads versus API security payloads, and builds you like this kind of spider graph of per each vulnerability, how many of them were detected, how many were not. And then it gives you baseline. Mod security is the most common open source WAF, and it has like four modes of operation. The most paranoid one is paranoia level 4. So it evaluates the solution you deployed versus mod security paranoia levels. Very convenient to do, well, to make a purchase decision, I guess. So some guys were working from company Wallarm. They're working on this tool to add more attacks. But if you have your like application-specific things that you think only your application supports, please submit pull requests to GoTestWAF. Please use it for evaluations. We will integrate it with different CI/CD and maybe run it as like a service eventually. So with that, let me do a quick demo. I have some time, right?
Yeah, sure.
How much more time do I have?
Actually, you have a lot of time.
I have a lot of time, right? Well, more time, the better. So this is the, oops. It doesn't go high because it's full screen. Please exit full screen. Okay. So what you can do, it's a very simple tool. Can you actually? You run it like using, you can run Docker. I have Golang on my computer, so I can just like, you can go like go run. And it will run the tool. It will show the help. How do I? Guess so. But what you can do is basically, the easiest way to run it without any parameters at all is just run the tool with URL parameter and point it to your website, which is protected by web application firewall. Then it will start scanning immediately. But what you can do is you also can specify the open API file to make it more aware. So for this talk, for the demo, I prepared four different environments. One of them is just an application called VAMP. It's a vulnerable API app written in Python. So it has vulnerabilities in it and has like Swagger file attached to it. And I deployed in AWS, and then I deployed it second time, but with AWS Web Application Firewall enabled, and I deployed it yet another time with Wallarm enabled, and then I deployed Cloudflare CDN and pointed to the unprotected app. So you can actually see each of them. OpenAPI file. So what we'll do is we'll scan it, just launch the tool. with this file, and then when you hit enter, did I miss something?
Say exit status 2.
The option OpenAPI is wrong, unknown.
It should be,
Maybe small way.
yeah, small. I can't see well on my screen. Let me check. Here should be, API is small, yeah. OpenAPI should be small. So this is basically the load balancer URL here, which has wall arm deployed. So you start hitting it, it will immediately start. Well, first it sends one payload and detects whether you actually have WAF or not. If it doesn't have WAF, it will stop operating because it says like apparently your solution doesn't block anything at all. So it should be in blocking mode. If it's just in monitoring mode, the tool wouldn't be able to detect whether WAF blocks. And now you can see like 2,000 payloads going on. And basically, it will go for a while, maybe for like a couple of minutes, and scan. It also it automatically detected WebSockets and gRPC. I didn't deploy WebSockets or gRPC, but please, if you use it in your production environment, please test that too, because you will be surprised. Very few web applications firewalls actually support WebSockets and gRPC. I'm just gonna stop the execution and show you the report that you get. So this is what WallArm looks like. You can see it did miss certain payloads. You can actually, when the tool finishes, it asks you to whether you want to include payloads in the report or not. So you can see mod security, this for mod security baselines. Mod security 100% paranoia mode is actually performing better than WallArm, but it comes at a cost of false positives. And on average, WallArm, of course, outperforms it because mod security level 4 is going to be very annoying for you. Like a lot of legitimate traffic will be blocked. And these are, well, specific payloads that we use. It shows how many hits, which payload it did detect, which it didn't detect, and so on. And then it shows, you see now, because I provided Swagger file, it actually explains which endpoints it scanned. And there was 19, I don't know why it's not included in the report, but there were like 19 payloads that passed. They were malicious, but WallArm didn't block them. Now let's check. This is actually Cloudflare API. I enabled OWASP and Cloudflare original rules, and it's fairly poor performance, like 56% score. If you go all the way down, exactly the same configuration. These are the payloads it did miss. So you see, for example, like this is clearly cross-site scripting, but it was encoded in base64 in URL path, and the app just, didn't care at all. So just missed pretty much everything as soon as it's encoded. Actually, maybe. I hope I scanned the right one. Yeah, it's the right one. And this is AWS WAF. Similar. You can see it does perform slightly better than Cloudflare. Well, it costs way more. You would hope it would perform better, but you can also see there are like what? 72 false positives got 72 didn't get blocked, but also if you scroll all the way down to true attacks, then you will see there are like 519 payloads actually bypassed, right? So WallArm had like 19, and AWS WAF has 519. Same for Cloudflare. Cloudflare had like hundreds of those. You can see 276 were bypassed. Actually, maybe Cloudflare performed better than AWS WAF. But basically, the purpose of this talk is just to show you the tool, and I suggest you just try and run it yourself. This one, I don't know what it was. It was also AWS WAF, I think. Different configuration. This is WallArm. What I wanted to show as well, like if you do WallArm has a free tier, so you can evaluate it freely. You can see all of those attacks. You see this WAMP app received attacks. You can see all of them going detected, and the tool will actually recreate the structure of your API based on the requests. You can see here this load balancer. It discovered this login endpoint. It discovered this register endpoint. So you can gather intel on your app on the security events that got detected and everything like that. So you can see here, it was in the payload was in the path, and then it was encoded using URL encoding, and then was base64 applied to it, and then it detected the payload here, right? So normally the request looks like the GoTestWAF payload looks like this. It doesn't really look like an attack. Like it's just like base64 thing, doesn't really look like an attack. But once you decode it, it actually has a cross-site scripting in it. So most of web application firewalls cannot decode this type of payloads. And that's why WallArm built this tool to just basically demonstrate that most of us would actually, if you make a very simple evaluation, most of us perform similarly. But if you make a really difficult evaluation, like with difficult encapsulated encodings, WallArm still performs well, but other WAFs pretty much miss most of the attacks. Well, with that, well, I can demo you something more, but yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.
We have maybe 20 minutes.
20 minutes more? Sorry, my talk was
Questions and,
shorter than I thought.
yeah.
So in case anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Hi, my name is Leonid. I have a question. What's the difference between API security and application security? You showed there are two options.
So application security and API security, the difference between them is that API security usually involves this kind of payloads, that are applicable to API. Like let's say you have JSON request and like GraphQL request. And application security payloads are more like in a traditional thinking, like a normal like post request, GET request, like submit a form using like www URL encoded format versus having like a encoded payload inside of API. But also APIs have API-specific vulnerabilities, like authorization bypass and things like that. So if you check OWASP top 10, but for API, there's a OWASP top 10 API version, you will see the difference between.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Seho. So my work involves in testing gRPC application at the moment, and I was wondering how you managed to build this WAF, specifically dealing with gRPC protocol.
Well, so gRPC is kind of binary protocol, and that's why a lot of tools do not support it because it's really hard to implement tooling for it, right? Because it's not just regular HTTP request; it's like a TCP/IP connection, and you have to like back what is Google buffer, protobuf encoding. You have to apply, and then you kind of embed fields in it in a special way. So what GoTestWAF can do when testing gRPC, it produces valid gRPC payloads. I mean, of course, it doesn't know your API structure, so it can't make valid requests to your gRPC payload. But they are valid in the sense they're decodable, right? So they're valid gRPC, they're just not valid for your app. Most of the tools can't generate even, valid, just something that web server would parse. So it wouldn't, web application firewall wouldn't even reach. It wouldn't even reach web application firewall because like Nginx wouldn't parse it or something like that. So that's why it's important to have encoder for gRPC. And WallArm, GoTestWAF supports generating gRPC payloads, and WallArm supports decoding gRPC payloads. So that as a web application firewall, it sits and listens to your traffic for gRPC. And that's probably right now the only WAF actually that supports gRPC. So most of WAFs will just see binary data. It's like just random garbage. So they wouldn't be able to detect any attacks. And WallArm sees binary data and understands the gRPC, unpacks it into like structure, realizes there are like other fields inside of it, and then it searches for the attacks inside of the fields. Yeah, but you can ask me later. I can probably demo your gRPC specific deployment if you want.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions?
Okay. Any other questions?
I'll just show really quickly.
Yeah. Well, we actually have a couple, like maybe 10 more minutes, so you can maybe show some stuff.
Yeah, I'll just show you GitHub of this tool. So you can see, well, there's actually more than 1,000 stars now. I lied. So please fork, contribute. And yeah, here in the inside of the tool, you can see under test cases, you see community, false positives, OWASP API, and OWASP, right? So answering your question, right? So OWASP API test cases, or for example, GraphQL post. Normally, it's not considered. GraphQL payloads are not considered to be web application security. It's considered to be like API security. Very few web application firewalls actually understand GraphQL. And more this year maybe, but like just 2 years ago, GraphQL, gRPC, nobody could do. And these are community payloads, different sizes. So you can see like all kinds of things that cause overflows, or web application firewalls stop inspecting. Like if it's a really long payload, like if it's a regular expression-based web application firewall, then it has performance issues searching for payload in a big, like if it's 128 kilobytes, the regular expression will run forever. So they deliberately create like long payloads because certain like kind of legacy WAFs just give up. So yeah, if you have like a gRPC specific stuff and you feel like this tool doesn't support it, please contribute. Also, I wanted to show the website. I don't know if you heard of it. It's called vulners.com. These guys contributed a lot of payloads to GoTestWAF. It is basically an aggregator of all feeds of all like threat intel. Like if somebody publishes a vulnerability, they like scrape the feeds from like Red Hat, Cisco, HackerOne, whatnot. So you can just search. You can just search your application that you use, or just subscribe to vulnerabilities of this application. Like let's say, for my blog, I use Ghost CMS. You can just like search and it will show you like there are like vulnerabilities in it. So whenever they see some kind of cool XSS or cool SQL injection, they contribute this payload to GoTestWAF. Like, there are like things like WAF bypass. If you search for it, it will just show you. I strongly suggest, well, this is our Warm website. But basically, you can search for a lot of security blog posts or news releases or whatnot using the search engine. Please try it out, vulners.com.
So it has everything, not only web, but also binary exploitation.
Oh, everything. It's basically any feed, any security feed you can think of. They just aggregate. So like all the CVE, like GitHub security blog, I don't know, like blogs, newsletters, updates, new release notes, you know, whatnot. So as long as it search hits this thing, you can find like some kind of security metadata for it. And they have very, very comprehensive list of those, and they have scanner, so you can scan for certain issues for these things. Like you can specify version, for example, I don't know, like say, Ghost CMS. And so on. Well, I mean, you can play with it. There's like advanced search capability. Any other questions, or I can just end my talk, I guess.
Quick question to that effect. Did I get correctly that the GoTestWAF considered the mod security as a kind of like a normal profile? So if you would deploy your application with mod security there, you would get an A and 100% scoring.
Not exactly. If you look at the, God, I don't see it. If you look at the baseline, it's not 100% for API security part and for, I think, true positive tests, but it was only 40% for application security tests, right? So, I mean, it just gives you baseline to compare. Like, let's say you have your solution, does it perform, like, for example, in this case, for API security, performs better than mod security paranoia level 2, but worse than mod security level 3. But it performs way better on application security on any paranoia level, right? So you should compare this overall score. Normally, yeah, the better paranoia level, the better score you get. The baseline, yeah, mod security level 4 is 70%. And for like WALARM, we have like say 90.
How it knows about mod security score? If you specify your files,
Well, mod security is open source, right? So you can just, you can actually test. Well, this is specific to certain version of mod security, I have to say, right? So this tool has this values hard-coded because we tested this tool against all mod security levels. They did update the rules since then, so I think mod security will get slightly better scores now if you run it yourself. You can actually deploy mod security yourself on some AWS instance and then run GoTestWAF and compare, you know, compare the baseline to the real value if you want. But these 4 lines are just for like illustrating how, you know, how bad or good your application. Like, because if I don't show you this, right, does it say like 90% is good or is it bad? Is it like, did it miss the whole 10% or did it detect the full 90%? So what you want to do is to have kind of comparison. And most of people don't have opportunity to deploy all possible web application firewalls, right? So because most of them are paid, I actually tried to evaluate this Japanese solution called Kogeki Shadan-kun, but they wouldn't even let me test it because they say like you have to buy it, like you have to be a customer or something like that. So WALARM free tier, you know, you can go play with it. But I had to buy, for this talk, I had to buy to show you Cloudflare results. I bought professional subscription for $20 just to see how it performs. So this is I think this is it. So you can compare it between the applications. So see, Cloudflare professional subscription performs slightly better than Mod Security Paranoia level 1, which is surprising because it actually uses Mod Security and I configured it to level 4. So maybe I misconfigured something. By the way, I open sourced my lab. So if you want to replay and say, okay, your results are all bullshit, then you can go to GitHub. To my profile, and I just published the CDK AWS Cloud Development Kit with 3 stacks. One deploys API AWS WAF, another deploys just the vulnerable application itself, so that you can use Cloudflare and other solutions. And the third one deploys 1PF wall arm. This is what I used for evaluation. So if you see some kind of misconfiguration, maybe that led to worse results, let me know. Maybe we can re-evaluate the solution. But this is basically the way to evaluate. Just like launch everything you have, run GoTestWAF, compare the results. Maybe tune settings, change configuration, see if it improves, so you can continuously benchmark your solutions. Ideally before you buy it.